Good evening, positive people. Buenos noches. Bonjour. Bon dia. Buongiorno. Ni hao. Memenjes. Dobre utro. Namaste. Sawadi. Chawem. Manga nangu manga. Como ye? Sopa wanang sung. Assalamu alaikum. Privet. Guten Tag. Kalimara. And as they say in some neighborhoods, what's good? My name is Kevin Booker Jr.
And I'm Daisy Torres.
And welcome to the Cultural Flipside. Daisy, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Kevin. How are you?
Fantastic. And I tell you, I'm feeling great. I feel, as I told my students sometime, I feel like a 5 today, which is I always give them a scale from 1 to 5. Yep. 1 and 2, you're not feeling so good. 5, you're feeling great. And I always ask them, give me a word on how you're feeling today.
I like that.
So, and that's all I do, like a check-in with all my students in the morning, you know, like when I'm starting class. But one thing that made me feel like a 1 and 2 was recently just watching the news and being, watching the news, and I'm seeing what's going on in our borders. And I know recently you and I, we were sitting down having a conversation about some of the things that are occurring. And for the viewers out there, Daisy, can you just put a little spotlight on some of the things that we were discussing the other day?
Yeah, it's a serious issue. I mean, I keep hearing it a lot on the news and on podcasts, and it's really just, forcing us to sort of think about, I'm just thinking about all the children, right?
All the children
that are coming in, migrating into the United States, and they're coming without their parents, right? And so the recent news that I just saw reported that 100,000 migrants have been coming over
100,000.
100,000 since February. That isn't that long ago.
No.
Right? And then of those 100,000, 19,000 are children.
Wait, 19,000 are children.
Children.
And please tell me what you were sharing with me earlier about some of them are infants.
Yes, recently in the news there was a disturbing story of a little boy. He might have been no more than 10, who was found roaming, the Texas border there, and a patrolman found him, and he was crying, and through an interpreter he was able to explain just that he was with a group and he got lost, right? And he thinks he was abandoned. He was very scared about being kidnapped or harmed. Luckily, as I continued following the story, the patrol took him into the detention center, and they're working him through the process, the system, which is another story, right? But I've heard others where babies as young as 11 months old are being left here, yes, unaccompanied, minors.
Oh my gosh!
It's a serious issue across our country right now. It's something that we often don't really think about here in Connecticut, because sometimes people think it's because it's over by Texas, Arizona, like we're in the Northeast. What does it have to do with us? But it has serious implications.
Absolutely.
For our many families, and I could imagine students who are relocating here to Connecticut. It's a problem, Kevin, a serious problem. And I'm so excited that we're actually going to dive a little more deeper into this conversation today with our guests, because for me, it's important that we are talking about these conversations here on the Cultural Flipside.
Absolutely.
And the reason is, we want to make sure that people are informed, right? And that we understand what those impacts are for us here in Connecticut, and that we have voice. We need to, empower ourselves and advocate, and, think about what we could do as citizens to be part of the change.
And then throughout the nation as well. Not just within Connecticut, but just also so people are aware of this crisis at the border. That's why today's show is Crisis at the Border. Think about it, what Daisy just shared with us all. 11-month-old. Now think of 11-month-old being left at the border.
Oh, I can't even imagine as a mother.
All by themselves, crying for their mother, crying. And that's why today is a very important show. And it's also important that we also become fully aware of what we can do to improve our communities and also help so many of those children who are crossing those borders.
Yes, it's really something that we really should be talking about and highlighting and really trying to understand. And so I'm excited about the guests today. who we have on, one of our guests is Rocio Tonico, who is a teacher in New London Public Schools. And why we want to hear from her is she's working directly with students, some in her classroom because she's a new
That's
arrivals
awesome.
teacher at the middle school. And so some of these students that she has on have been directly affected, right, about what's happening at the detention center or just the trauma that comes with it, right? The
Right.
social emotional piece. So I'm excited to hear from her perspective as a teacher, what are the students experiencing, right? And then I'm also excited that we have Yasmin Evelyn Castillo,
Wow.
right? She's joining us from Chicago.
Chicago.
Right,
Yes.
Chicago. I was excited about that. She's
Yes.
going to talk about some of the work that she had in a role that she once had as a supporting the families at the detention center. So I want to hear that like sort of inside
Interesting.
scoop about what that experience was
Yes.
like. And then finally, I really want to learn more about this advocacy center that we have here in Connecticut.
Iris.
Iris. You want to talk
Iris.
a little bit more about Iris?
Yeah.
What's Iris stand for? Do you know?
Oh,
I'm
boy.
putting you a quiz. Yeah, because I had to learn.
And New Haven.
Yes,
They're located in New
yes,
Haven.
yes.
And they've been doing work for, I think the past 2 decades almost.
Absolutely.
Might be, I had the opportunity to have the director on one of my panels a year ago.
Oh, really?
But I don't want to spoil it for everyone else.
Yes.
So, like, if you can introduce
Sure.
the director, because he's doing a phenomenal job.
He's amazing. So Chris George, executive director, right, for integrated, right, refugee, immigration, right, services that are
yeah.
being provided in New Haven. And, so we are actually going to be having a conversation soon about some of the services that we need to do in Hartford Public Schools in my role there. So I'm excited that these 3 guests are going to shed a different light and a different perspective on this
Absolutely.
very important topic.
Absolutely. So, Ron, please bring on our guest, because
Awesome.
we would love to let the world know what they can do to help out during this crisis that we're seeing at our borders.
Oh
my gosh.
goodness.
Good to see you all.
Welcome to the Cultural Flipside.
Flipside.
How are you?
I'm good.
I'm good.
Awesome. I see Rocio. Welcome. And I also see Mr. George. I know you want me to
George.
call you Chris. How are you? Welcome. And thank
Yes,
you, Jasmine,
please.
for being with us.
Jasmine, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Just a little tired today.
Oh, yeah.
Busy, huh?
Yes,
totally.
very busy. I'm currently in grad school, so
Ah, well, I just want to thank the 3 of you for being on the show. We're really excited to talk to you and get your perspective a little bit more on this very important topic. So I'm just going to start, right? It's because we love our viewers to get to know each one of you. I did a little intro, but there's nothing better than to hear it from you, right? And so I would love if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and a little something about the work that you do. So I will start with Chris first, followed by Rocio, and then Yasmin.
Great. Well, thanks a lot. And, it's a lot of fun to be on the show. Thanks for inviting me. So my name is Chris George, and I've been the director of IRIS, which stands for Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, for about 16 years. And IRIS is a refugee resettlement agency, and also we provide services to all kinds of immigrants. So refugees who've been selected and vetted overseas and invited to come to the United States to start new lives, but also people who have made it here on their own and need help. And boy, do they need a lot of help during the pandemic. So, we've quadrupled the size of our food pantry. We've hired more immigration attorneys. We've hired Spanish-speaking case managers. And hopefully we'll get through this horrible pandemic and people will come out on the other side okay. But we've been pretty busy, and now with a administration in Washington that believes in welcoming immigrants, we hope to be really busy over the next 4 years.
Thank you.
And it's good to see you, Chris.
Thanks for inviting me.
Rocio.
Thanks for having me, guys. My name's Rocio. I am originally from Chicago. I grew up there. I was actually born in Mexico and came to Chicago with my family. and I didn't move to New London, Connecticut until 2013 when I graduated high school, and I moved out here for college. I'm currently a bilingual middle school teacher in New London, and I work particularly with newly arrived students in a transitional bilingual program. I teach ELA and math. So that program, these students come with me. They stay with their little cohort for basically all day long, and we work on acquiring their language skills. So once they reach a point where they have enough language to survive and succeed in their academics, then they exit the program and join their grade level peers in an English only classroom. So that's me.
Rocio, can you also put a little spotlight on your partnership with Connecticut College as well?
So I did graduate from Connecticut College in 2017. And even after I graduated, I continued to bring students to the college for a program called Enrich. So we partnered with Connecticut College, and the students would come onto the college campus to kind of give them like an experience of being at a college campus. They got to work with college students as they were mentored. They did different activities, and it was a really great experience for the students and for the mentors. And I was able to do both sides. So when I was at Connecticut College, I was a mentor working with students at the middle school, and then I was able to flip it over and be a teacher, take the students over to the college.
Thank you for that,
That's amazing.
Rocio. That's amazing. And I just want to add that I met Rocio when she was freshly out of college, and when I worked in New London, and we snagged her up and hired her. We were so excited. She's a great addition. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yasmin, let's hear from you.
Yeah, hi, my name's Hasmin. Grew up in Chicago, attended Connecticut College with Rocio, but I graduated a year earlier. Then I came back to Chicago and I started working for Heartland Alliance. So Heartland Alliance works with unaccompanied minors. So the Unaccompanied Children's Program, it is a residential program for children who have entered the U.S. without parents or documentation. So when they're children and they don't have anything, they arrive to our facility within 3 days of being at the border.
Wow.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing with the world who you are. Now, when we talk about this crisis, this has been a crisis that has been going on for a very long time. And recently we've seen the footage on the news of so many children crossing the border. And the crisis at the border continues to impact thousands of children and families across the world. How has this impacted you and your current role? And explain why today's discussion is so very important. I'm gonna start with you, Mr. Chris George, and then I'll go right to Rocio and then Yasmin.
Right. Well, in some ways, we wish we could be more involved in helping the children, mostly children who are crossing the border. We've reached out to the federal government, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, Department of Health and Human Services. We've reached out to our members of Congress and we've said, look, get them out of those crowded shelters on the border, find the sponsors as quickly as you can, and then when they're placed with their sponsors, who are usually friends or relatives, then contact organizations like ours, and we can do what they call post-placement services. We can help enroll the kids in school. We can make sure they've got a decent apartment. We can connect them to health care. We can make sure they have an attorney who can represent them. But it's moving so slowly, and they're moving people out of the crowded border areas to crowded shelters across the country. And I don't see them putting resources into identifying sponsors. That's really what we should be doing. Identifying those sponsors and placing the kids with sponsors as soon as possible.
Interesting. Wow. Rocio, What's coming to your mind right now as you think about this crisis as well at the border?
So, majority of my students are coming from all over Latin America. I have students from Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, um, Honduras, Guatemala, Mexico, Colombia, Peru. Like they're coming from everywhere. So a lot of my students are experiencing this crisis at the border firsthand. They are out of school for months while they're traveling from point A to point B. Some of them are traveling with family, some of them are traveling with family friends, others are traveling alone. And the amount of trauma that these students are coming with already, it kind of makes the kids have to grow up a lot faster than other kids their ages. And they're in the classroom and they're still getting triggered by experiences that they experience through their travel. And I don't think the media always highlights all of the aspects of this crisis. I think oftentimes they really focus on like the political aspects, but they aren't really focusing on the true impact that these experiences are brought upon the families and children that are making that travel.
Rosia, can you give us an example for the viewers who are watching who may not have the same experiences that you have in the classroom as a teacher, firsthand dealing with these students who are your babies, who you love and you care about so much? Can you share with the world an example of the trauma and how that is triggered even in a classroom?
I mean, I have the one particular kid I'm thinking about. He comes into school angry all the time because he had to go through this very traumatic experience by himself. He traveled with his older brother, and at some point during their travel, they got separated. And that, as a sixth grader, coming and doing that travel by yourself, like it has a true impact. And a lot of the time, they have trust issues. You know, they can't really openly talk about everything that they've gone through. Even when they try to, it sometimes it just doesn't come out. And other times, you know, just the other day, the kids were eating breakfast in my classroom, and they got an egg burrito, and the kids were like, "Oh my gosh, these are just like the ones that we would eat when we were in La Hielera," which is what they call that area down there, where they stayed for a few days, and just making those connections still from the experiences that they were experiencing, like it doesn't leave them.
Wow.
That's really powerful.
Thank you, Rosia, for sharing that with us. Thank you. Yasmin, what comes to your mind right now as you're hearing the stories from Chris and you're hearing stories from Rosia as well?
Yeah, and like something that Chris said is like, you know, finding these sponsors. So my role was a family reunification specialist. So as soon as these children would arrive, I would meet them and be like, who are you going to? And the issue is that most of these kids don't know anyone here. And so at our facility, they would receive, you know, residential care, case management, education, medical care. They would receive a therapist, a clinician to work with them, an attorney, an advocate, all these resources, you know. And just for reference, I am in Chicago, so this is here in Chicago. And the biggest issue is communicating with home country, whether that's in Brazil, Honduras, Guatemala, Cambodia, Nepal, Haiti, Bangladesh, all these countries. Is a lot of these countries are facing different political prosecutions, religious prosecutions, many different things that, you know, we're not able to get a hold of them. And what comes to mind is I did have one of the kiddos that I was working with who was on my caseload for about 2 years and a half. And so we saw his 14th, 15th, 16th birthday until his father was actually able to come from Brazil to the US to be able to sponsor his own son. And we tried endless sponsors. We tried maybe like 6, 7 different sponsors, but the issue is policy is always changing. And so all of the cases that we do have before they're approved to go with a sponsor have to be approved by a what's called the federal field specialist under the Office of Refugee and Resettlement. And so there's a lack of resources after the kids leave. And hearing Rocio is one of my closest friends, and I've heard her experiences and visited her classroom, and this care needs to continue even after they leave these facilities, because they need that support. And it's a very traumatic experience for the children and the families, and the language barrier, you know, and it's very unfortunate that there's not enough people to be able to help find these sponsors. Or there's a lot of places that closed down during COVID because they couldn't afford to keep these places open. um so it's hard, and it takes a lot out of you to do this kind of work every day, to try to push yourself, because you do get burned out very quickly.
I could just imagine that it's
Wow.
heartbreaking to see what you see, right? And just the experience. I can't even imagine, Yasmin, that you were just talking about that, just being that close to what's happening. That has to have really, been impactful. And so, my next question is to each of you, and you each touched upon it about, what are some of the trials and tribulations that, the families are facing. But what I really would be interested in, in adding to that question is, a lot of people have misconceptions about why people are immigrating here, right? And I would love for you, to talk a little bit, to sort of give that insight to our viewers. What are, from your students and your families that you're working with, just, why are they coming? What are, what is their hope? And, what are some of the trials and tribulations that maybe we haven't talked about that is affecting them, particularly here in Connecticut?
Absolutely.
I'll start with Rocio on this one, and I'll follow with Yasmin, and then with Mr. George.
So I don't think there's like a clear black and white reason as to why families migrate. They're all facing their own problems back home, like Hasmin touched upon. It might be a political problem. It might be economical. It might be, they're fleeing from something, right? But regardless of that reason, they're here. What are we doing here to provide the support that they need to make sure that they are on their feet? And I think one thing that is often misconstrued is that coming here, not knowing the language, not having a place to stay, sometimes not even having family, really makes it very hard for people to be in a comfortable position, to live comfortably. I know some of the families I work with, they bounce around from family friends to other families, from towns to towns, until they finally find a place where they're comfortable enough to be on their own. And you add the language into there, and it's hard for families to find the resources that they need. Being here in New London, I had to do research and ask around about resources available, because they're not always there out in the open. You kind of have to dig for them. And if I myself, a bilingual person, is having a hard time finding these resources, then what about these families?
Great point. Great point. Hasmi, what do you think?
Oh, a lot comes to mind, but I'm gonna talk about a different aspect about that question, because a lot of what I have witnessed is trafficking of children, which is very difficult to talk about. It's very difficult to witness. A lot of these kids, a lot of what happened, of what I saw in my work, is that they would come with this parent, but something, I guess, like, didn't feel right when they were crossing the border, and turned out that the person who was trying to bring this child was a trafficker.
Oh my gosh.
Pretending to be the parent of this child.
Wow.
And that happened more than I would like to say, because, and it's very difficult. And these children, because of fear of their family and home country, they'll say, yeah, that's my father. Yeah, that's my mother. Yes, they are. And then after months of trying to figure out what's really going on, and working with the consulate to verify different documents, because we do get a lot of fraudulent documents. And so we have really close relationships with different consulates and try to build relationships. So we're able to figure out and find family in home country if we can find them. And it's really difficult for these children, because sometimes we do get children who were already trafficked, and then they're found by child services, and then they're placed in our residential facilities. And them having to cope with that, not talking to their family, not seeing them. For some of these children, it takes them years. It takes them so long to get to the US that most of them, they stay in Brazil for a bit, and they learn Portuguese, and they'll speak Haitian, and then they'll speak Portuguese, and then they'll come and then like adapt and learn Spanish. And it's such a struggle for them to then adapt and figure out like, what now? What do I do now? And for the families that I have worked with who ended up going to Connecticut, it's a lack of resources. There's not enough for them there to be able to help everyone, because a lot of these nonprofit organizations, they don't have the funding, they don't have enough people, there's long waiting lists. It's hard to find sometimes a good attorney who's not gonna you know, make them pay fees that they don't have to pay, because they don't understand how, you know, immigration works and those policies work, and how to get a work permit or a green card. They have no idea, because it's such a complex system, and the policy is continuously changing. And just, you know, bringing awareness and having a space like this to talk about it is so important. And so I just, you know.
Thank you so much, Hasmin, for your intake. That I mean, just listening to you, it just, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. How about you, Chris? What are some of your thoughts?
Well, you know, I got an email last week from someone, and I often don't get emails like this. She was asking, why don't we, or my organization, why doesn't IRIS, you know, help our own? That's how she put it, our own.
Wow.
Interesting.
And, you know, I got back to her and I said, I don't really know what you mean by our own, but, you know, we have a certain expertise in helping people who've newly arrived to the United States and help them get off to a good start. And she replied, and she mentioned 3 things that are these misconceptions that so many people have. She said, well, most of these people don't want to become Americans. Actually, not true. Most of these people are illegal. And, you know, I don't really think of them as illegal. I mean, if someone has entered the United States because they're running for their life, they're fleeing persecution or conditions that are just as bad, then we have a moral obligation to welcome them, and they have a right to enter. And then she said something else. She said, and they receive voluminous assistance from the government, which is so untrue. So, you know, it's up to all of us. I mean, I have to take my hat off to Rusio and Yasmin, who do amazing work, frontline work, face to face, rolling up their sleeves, working with people who have suffered so much.
Absolutely.
And, you know, we need to engage more Americans in this work. We need to get more, you know, volunteers, community groups, get them involved so they can meet the people who you know, Rusio and Yasmin work with, and learn the truth. That's what we need to do.
Wow.
And learn the truth.
I heard that loud and clear, right? Space to have this conversation. I heard from Hasmin, right? The trauma the students are facing from Rocio. I'm hearing it, right? Really powerful. Really
powerful. And it just, as reflecting on that, it made me think of 16 years ago. So 16 years ago in 2005, I was teaching at Buckley High School. And Buckley High School has a wide range of students from all over the world. And one of the reasons why I always start off greeting in so many different languages is because of my students that were from various countries. Many of them were refugees, and many of them actually crossed the border as well. And many of them seen their families get murdered and massacred right in front of them. And I remember some of my students, when they were 9th graders and 10th graders, and as a teacher, that was their first form of education, was in high school. Because they actually attended school at those refugee camps. And I had students from Bosnia, Albania, Guatemala, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Uganda, DR, so many, Haiti, just so many different countries. And all the students that I had really just wanted to be positive, successful individuals in their life. And they have gone on to be successful. And when I think of what Chris George just shared with us, he said, helping the newly arrived have a new start. So the question I have for all of you, and I think of all those students that I taught, even 16 years ago and throughout these years in my past 20 plus years of teaching and having the opportunity to teach those students who have actually encouraged me and changed my life. That's the reason why my master's thesis was on Liberian refugees at Central Connecticut State University, was because of my influence being inspired by my students. A question that comes to my mind is, where can people find more information to support or resources if they want to learn more? Because as a teacher, you know, I was engaged and I was passionate because I was around my students every single day. And I wanted to learn more because I wanted them to feel welcomed and invited at our school. But for individuals right now who are learning and watching this show, what can they do? Where can they find that information, that support, and those resources for some of their neighbors, for some of those students, some of those teachers, and also just for that individual out there who just really want to help as well? I'm going to go to Yasmin, and then I'm going to go to Chris George, and then I will go to Rocio.
Yeah, so one thing that I learned when I started this work is that policy has so much information, and it's actually accessible to learn about what these children at residential facilities, what services are they receiving. And so I encourage folks to go to the Office of Refugee Resettlement website. There's it's the Office of Administration for Children and Families, and they actually have a guide about children entering the U.S. who are unaccompanied and how that placement is for them, what is, considered safe in the care, the services they receive, how those programs are managed, and also resources and services available after they're released. And then the second one is the Young Center. It's for immigrant children's rights, and they have great resources and they do great advocacy work. So pretty much what they do, and I don't know if there's one in Connecticut, but there might. I know they have an office in DC, but it's just great to know this website and what they do, because they actually have people volunteer and go to these residential facilities where the children are at and become an advocate for them. And so they meet with them once a week. They'll play games or even just talk to them over the phone during COVID to really know that there's somebody on their side who's going to advocate for them.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you so much. And Mr. Chris George.
So I would jump on our website. We've got resources there, and people can start there. There's a new book out. It's a graphic novel about 2 Syrian refugee families beginning a new life in Hartford and New Haven. So this is a book about refugees coming to Connecticut.
Wow.
It's called Welcome to a New World, and you can get more information by going on our website, irisct.org, irisct.org. And, but as I said before, Daisy and Kevin, and I'm sure that Rocio and Yasmin will probably agree, the best way for people to learn about, the crisis at the border, why people are fleeing Latin America to come here, why refugees have fled their countries, is to meet them and you know, and help tutor them.
Right.
And help them find a
That's right.
job and help walk the kids to school or show them how to shovel snow or rake leaves. Get to know them. And we really believe in connecting, you know, Americans with new Americans, because that will build public support, and we need more public support for this great American tradition of welcoming people from other countries.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Thank you, Mr.
you
Chris
so
George.
much.
Thank you so much. And Rocio.
Yeah, so I think Chris put it perfectly. A lot of what I have learned myself has been from listening to my students in their own conversations, in conversations that they have with me, talking to their family. You'd be very surprised how open some families and some children will be to talk about their experiences. I personally am still learning the resources and supports available to students and families in New London. But luckily, I have really great colleagues that either know about information or can point me in the right direction for more information. But I will say that to be cautious about where you do get your information. Sometimes Google isn't the best source on finding information about what's going on, especially since some of the information can be one-sided, information can be left out. So yeah, definitely go straight to the source if you can, or talk to somebody who works with this sort of population.
Absolutely.
Just truly, this is amazing information that you are providing to our viewers. Thank you so much for that. I'm taking notes as you guys are speaking because I think it's so powerful and so important, right? As you've mentioned, right, the importance of finding out that knowledge for yourself, right? And not relying on secondhand information or what you hear on the media or what your friend told you about certain groups of people, right? We really need to be informed,
Absolutely.
right? So thank you for that. And as we begin to close, first of all, again, I cannot thank you each enough for taking time to come and talk about this very important topic. Rocio knows me well and just how passionate I am about this. And just the fact that we're having this open dialogue is really important, right? And it is starting to, bring about the public awareness and the conversations that people are not having. And even if we can influence one listener, right? Then we
Just
hit our
one,
objective,
at least
right?
one.
That's what we wanted to do. So, for our viewers, can you leave us maybe, inspiring words, words of encouragement, a quote, something that you just end our conversation with? That would be wonderful, so that those that are listening to us really just leave today's conversation with some more thinking and reflecting. So I'm going to start with Chris. And then I'll move to Hasmin and Rocio. So, Chris, floor is yours.
So final thoughts, the audio cut out, so I didn't get your question, but I'm just going to imagine I heard it. Final thoughts. I think we all know that we need comprehensive immigration reform. We need our Congress to pass laws so that we're not bouncing up and down between executive orders every time there's a new president. The way to get Congress to do this is people pressure, grassroots pressure. So, Daisy, you mentioned if we can change one person's mind, well, that's great. But I think we can change more than one person's mind. And if we change minds and those people write letters or send emails or phone calls to their representatives, I think we can begin to shift the tide a little bit. And that's what we need, is really our Congress to step forward and pass comprehensive immigration reform.
Thank you. Very, very true. Okay, Hasmin.
And Yeah, I'll just share. I think it's never too, one thing is like it's never too late to help the immigrant and refugee population. Never. No matter how old you are, there's always something you can do that can be done. And whether it's small, one of the most beautiful things I saw where I worked is that volunteers that we had came to give the children haircuts and like
Mm.
give the girls like a makeover and let them do their nails and have like a nice like a girls night and have like a slumber party with a movie. um and even just small things like that to bring them joy and introduce them to like this new culture of what is it like, what is it like to live in America and what it's like to live in the US, and very different from where they come from. And then, secondly, is be kind to yourself when you're doing this kind of work and make time for yourself to do some self care
Mm.
because it's something you could take with you at home every night. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you can't really take care of others and help others. So that's just a reminder.
Thank
Very
you.
important.
Oh my goodness, love that. Rocio.
So, from a teacher's perspective, I do just want to say that I love the population that I work with because they come here and they want to learn. They want to learn the language. They want to do better. They want to succeed. A lot of my students are like, I want to be this when I grow up to give back to my mom, or I want to do this to have my parents come to the US. Like they are thinking not only about themselves, but they're thinking of like more. They have a bigger picture, and the ambition that these children are coming with is amazing. So I really love working with my group of kids, and we've grown into a tight little family.
Yes, you have.
So I just want to leave off with that.
Yes,
That's
I can
beautiful.
definitely attest to the family structure that
Yes.
Rocio has, having worked with her directly in New London. The structure that Rocio has set up is just like exactly that. They want to stay with her, right? Because it's a safe place. And they're like family. And so, our students in New London are very blessed to have you as their teacher, Rocio. That was the best hire I did.
I know.
Just saying. Again, I just want to thank you, each of you, for your time today. Each one of you had a different perspective, but very powerful words, experiences, stories. And, Kevin and I have talked about the cultural flip side is about that. Right?
Absolutely.
We want to hear the stories. We want to empower people. We want to, advocate for change, right? And this is a safe space to do that. So thank you so much for your time and your efforts today on this very important
And
topic.
I also want to say thank you for following your calling, because many of us in our lives, we get so caught up with wanting to follow what people have told us to follow, but you have followed your calling. So I want to thank you for your dedication, your commitment, and your passion to uplifting those children and those families when others around may not understand or see the crisis at the border, but you continue to fight and you continue to push forward and make sure that those students are going to be empowered and ready for the world. So I want to thank you so much for what you are doing on the ground level. Thank you.
Absolutely. As we say in Spanish, right? Sigue luchando, right? Siguen luchando. Keep fighting the good fight, right? This is hard work. I think Jasmine said it beautifully. Be kind to yourself, right? But we need you. Right, you are, and I think Chris mentioned it. To me, frontline. You're our heroes, right? Because you are out there, right, advocating, supporting, directly working with some of our most vulnerable populations, and we really do appreciate all that you do. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Have a wonderful day. Be blessed. Be well.
That was amazing.
Wow.
I just think about Gandhi's quote when he says, be the change you wish to see in the world. They are living by that example and empowering their children and their students.
Absolutely.
Even through all adversity, the obstacles that they had to overcome and go through.
Absolutely.
And when I was listening to them, I was thinking about my own family coming from South Carolina. They fled because of domestic terrorism to come to Connecticut. So my family came on the third wave of the migration from the South because of domestic terrorism that took place in the South. So, you know, a lot of times we never even talk about some of those issues that occurred. And as Brian Stevenson has said in one of his documentaries, those are like refugees who are coming from the South, fleeing those families, those black families as well. So when I was connecting with a lot of my students 16 years ago, 20 years ago, I also thought about my family and stuff, watching some of my cousins who were probably pulled out of their homes and being lynched. Things within that sort of nature right here on this soil.
Wow.
So when I think about, it's my duty to make sure that those children are educated.
That's right.
And it's our duty here on the cultural flip side to continue to put a spotlight on those issues that are occurring to make sure the next generation has an opportunity.
That is so true. I mean, you know, what really resonated today for me was, you know, something that Hasmin said, which is, you know, it's never too late, right? And there's always something that you could do, right? We need to ensure that we're being part of the change, right? And that we're, you know, just because, you know, you're not having huge impact, little things matter, right? And I think that's really important. And, you know, when I think about what you were mentioning with your students, you know, I started off as an elementary school teacher, but where I ended up was working with students whose first language was not English. And I, just like Rocio, you know, working with this population of students just is the most gratifying, the most beautiful work an educator can do. And until you understand those trials and tribulations these students and families face, no one should be judging.
Absolutely not.
Right? And all these misconceptions out there, you need to really check yourself, right? Because
check your own biases.
Absolutely, right? Because there's a lot behind this issue, and really just getting to know. I think Chris said it great. Get to know people, right? Learn about their journey, right? Their background.
Absolutely.
Just what you just said right now about you. I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's about having
here in
these
this country.
conversations.
Right.
That's what I'm saying. We need to do more of that. Thank God we have this show to do that.
That's right. That's right.
I love it. This is what I love about the cultural flip side. You know, that we're having these really important dialogues and conversations in the safe space. And so I think it's wonderful.
It is. And, you know, I want to say a prayer for those families and everything as well, because it touches my heart so much.
Absolutely.
You know, I just think about my students. Even now, like, I have so many students that come from so many countries. And I think about in 2005, you know, I'm not going to say her name because now she's actually, she's a doctor now. And when she came from Liberia, she actually, as I said earlier on the show, she inspired my thesis, my master thesis. And when she arrived here in the United States, her first form of education was in 9th grade. But I remember her and many of those students, they would say to me, Mr. Booker, can I get 300 vocabulary words this weekend? Because I want to memorize and study those words. And their drive and their motivation to continue on and push forward and continue on and learn more.
Right.
You know, and I said to myself, I'm going to make sure that they get the best education that they deserve and advocate for them.
Absolutely.
And that's when I look at Rocio and I look at Yasmin and I look at Mr. Chris George, that's what I see. And we have to continue working as a community.
Absolutely.
You know, and empowering those families and those children. You know, and that's the beauty of even having this dialogue today on crisis at the border.
Absolutely. I think it's ready time for prayer. Let's do it.
So God, thank you so much for this day. Thank you so much for this time. Thank you so much for waking us up this morning and allowing us to be able to have this conversation today on the cultural flip side. God, please protect those families. Please protect those children who are crossing the border and who are in the schools and making the transition now within our communities, Lord. God, please protect them and cover them. And thank you so much for allowing us to come together today in your word. We love you and appreciate you. Amen.
Adiós. Gracias, amén. Gracias a todos. Que pases un buen día y adiós.
Remember, you could pray anywhere If you don't feel like praying, you just please meditate, take a walk, because you just have to continue working on yourself, because when you work on yourself, you can also encourage others as well. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining the Cultural Flipside.